Now, if you're like me, you probably spend a lot of time on YouTube, and sometimes you find this really good music video that you've never heard before. So what do? You copy the title, you open up Spotify, you search for it, you find the match, you right click it, you add it to your like songs. Now, all of those steps are quite long, right? And if you're doing it for 20, 50, 100 songs, that can get quite tedious. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can automate all of that using Python. Now, just before I get started, please give this video a like. It's a small thing, but it would really help me grow this channel. And as long as I get likes on my videos, I'm going to keep making videos like this for all of you. Now, for this video, we're going to need a couple of APIs and libraries. Now, if you don't know what APIs are, that's totally fine. I made a really good video explaining what they are, so you can click that in the link above. Definitely check that out. But starting off with the first one we need is the YouTube Data API. The YouTube Data API is going to let us get all of our playlists and all of the videos in each of our playlists from our YouTube channel. The second thing we're going to need is the YouTube DL library. Now, we're going to use that to get the artist and the song from each YouTube video. You're probably asking, why can't we use the YouTube Data API to do that? Annoyingly, we can't, because they don't give you that information, not easily anyway, so the YouTube DL library is perfect to do that. Then the last API we're going to need is the Spotify web API. That's going to allow us to search for songs on Spotify and then add them to our Spotify liked songs. So once you've created your Python project, I use PyCharm, you can use VS Code or any other editor you like. I'm going to start off by creating a run.py file. For me, this is going to be the entry point for the program, so I recommend you do that too. The next few files I'm going to create are going to be client files. So one is the YouTube client.py. That's going to have all the logic for us to be able to get videos and our playlists. And then the next file I'm going to create is the Spotify client.py. That's going to let us search for songs on Spotify and then add them to our library. Now, we're going to need some credentials, and so I like to keep clean and organized, so I'm going to create a creds directory that's going to store any credential files, and then I'm also going to create a requirements.txt file. In that file, I'm going to list out all the libraries that we're going to be using for the project. Now, in Python projects, what tends to happen is that if you import files in different places, we might end up running code that we don't want to run. And so this if name.maincheck I'm adding here ensures that when we run the program, we're very explicit about exactly what code we want to run in the terminal. And so in this case, I'm being very explicit and saying that I want to run the run function. Bit of a mouthful there, but essentially it's a good habit to get into when it comes to Python programming. So now that we know we're going to need a few libraries, let's go to the requirements.txt file and add them in. So we're going to need the Google API Python client, we're going to need the Google OAuth library, and the other library we're going to need is the YouTube DL library. By the way, I'm going to put I'm going to put a link to this whole project in the description below, so feel free to just go to that link, copy the source code, copy the requirements, and put them into the requirements text file if you're following along. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a YouTube client class. Within this class, we're going to have the methods that are going to interact with the YouTube Data API. For now, I'm just going to put pass in each one of these methods. That's a Python way of saying just do nothing for now, and we're going to fill them later on. So what are the methods that we need? Well, we're going to need a method to be able to get all of our playlists on YouTube. So let's write get playlists. Another method that we're going to need is to be able to get all the videos in a playlist, so that way we can find all the music videos in the chosen playlist. That's probably going to need to take some sort of playlist ID, so let's put that in there for now. And the last one we're going to need is we're going to need to get the artist and song from the YouTube video. This you need a separate library for. I mentioned YouTube DO is a library that's going to allow us to extract that information, so let's put that method in there. Now, actually connecting to the YouTube Data API involves us specifying our credentials and doing a few other bits and pieces. And to do all of that, luckily Google provide us a snippet in their documentation. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that into our YouTube client class. And then I'm just going to change the location of our credentials file, and then we're good to go. Once I've copied it in, as you can tell, there's a few imports missing. So what we're going to do is just write the imports for those. So here I'm going to get the Google OAuth library and the Google API client. Now, what I want to do is I just want to clean up a bit here. So I'm going to remove the bits and pieces at the bottom that we don't need. This is just some boilerplate code that we copied over, so we don't need any of that. So let's get rid of that. The second thing I want to do is I want to make it so that we pass in the location of the credentials when we initialize the class. So that way we're not going to hard code the location in this file. And that way it's a bit more maintainable and scalable a bit later on. So what we're going to do, we take the credentials location as a parameter, and then want to assign it to this variable here. Or actually, better yet, let's not assign it to that variable at all. Let's pass the credentials location directly into the call for creating the client. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set self.YouTube API client equal to the YouTube client. So let's start writing the code to get the list of playlists. So the YouTube client has a function called playlist.list, and as you can imagine, that's just going to get all the playlists from our YouTube channel. In the part variable, or in the parameter, sorry, we need to specify what data we want for each playlist. Here we're just going to get specify the ID and a snippet. The max results I'm going to set to 50, and this is just telling YouTube we want a maximum of 50 playlists. Pretty sure I've got less than that, so we should be good on that front. And the last thing is we want to do is set mine equal to true, so that way we get our own playlists and not someone else's that we've saved. To actually then execute that call, we're going to type request.execute, and we'll store the result in the response variable. Now YouTube's going to come back with a lot of data in this response variable. All we care about is the list of playlists, and so to do that I'm going to call a lovely list comprehension in Python that's going to go through the response dictionary, but specifically the key items. That's going to have a list of playlists. We're going to get that as a list, put it into the playlist variable, and return that back from this function. So in this function, what we want to do is we want to get the all the videos in a playlist. So YouTube, the data API has another function similar to the one in the last function, which is playlist items.list. Similar parameters, we're passing the playlist ID. I'm also going to pass in the part, which is the same as before, the ID and the snippet. We'll execute the request and then we'll store it in the response variable. Now what's different here is instead of us creating a list comprehension, we're actually going to need to get a bit of data from each video in the response. And the data that we need to start off with is going to be the video ID. That we're going to use because unfortunately the YouTube data API don't give us the artist and the track for YouTube video. We're going to have to get that ourselves, and that's where the YouTube DO library comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call a function on self. We haven't yet implemented this one, and we're going to implement it in a second, but that's going to get the artist and track from a YouTube video given a video ID. And then we're just going to do a check here. As long as we've got the artist and the track, we'll return both the artist and the track. Actually, I just remembered, given that we're not going to have a single song, we're going to have multiple songs, it makes sense to create a songs array, because of course we're going to have multiple music videos for which we're going to need to get the artist and the track. So let's create a songs array, and what I'm going to do here is to keep it clean. Every time we get an artist and the track, we're going to add it to this list of songs, but what we're going to do is we're going to create a song class, a song object here. We're going to pass our artist and track. So let's scroll up to the top. I'm going to create a quick class here that's going to be class song, and what that's going to do is it's going to take an artist and a track. So it's quite simple. It's not going to do much other than store some data that we're going to use later on. So let's do that here. So in the init function, we're going to take the artist and track. And then what we'll do with that is anytime we get the artist and the track, we create a song object, we add it to the list of songs, and then what we'll do is return that list of songs back in the function. Now to get the artist and the track from the video, we're going to use the YouTube DO library. It's a great library which you can pass a YouTube video URL to, and it gives you information about the video. You can also use it to download videos too, but since we don't want to do that, we're going to have to make sure we set a parameter when we call the library. So here I'm going to quickly import the YouTube DO library, and then down below I'm going to call the YouTube DO, and in this case it takes options. I'm going to pass an option called quiet and set that to true, and that's just going to make it so we can avoid all the output logs that are going to be printed out if we run the program. So I'm going to set that to quite true so we can get rid of all of that. And here's the key bit. You want to set download equal to false so that the YouTube DO library doesn't actually download the video. Last thing we want to do is we want to get the artist and the track from the video, and then we want to return both from the function. Now there's just one more thing I want to do, and since we created a class for a song, we might as well create a class for a playlist. Again, this is going to be a very simple class, and it's just going to store the ID and the title of a playlist. The reason why I'm creating these classes is because later on, when it comes to us accessing, a song or a playlist, it's nice to be able to have it as an object, so that we can do playlist.id or song.artist. So that's quite handy. So I've just created a playlist cast, and then when we actually call the function to get playlists, I'm going to instantiate the playlist object based on what we get back in the response from the YouTube client. So let's create that here, and all we're going to do is we're going to pass in the ID as well as the title of the playlist, and that's it really. And so now we've got a list of playlist objects, and we're going to return that back from this function. Now we're going to need to authenticate with Spotify's web API, and to do that you're going to need a token. So all you need to do to get that is go to Spotify's web API dashboard, select one of the API methods, click the get token button, and then once you've done that, select the scope to modify the user's library. In other words, that's just going to allow us to add songs to our library. Once you've done that, you're going to get a token. Take note of that because we're going to use that in a second. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the Spotify client class. It's going to be similar to the YouTube client class in that it's going to have methods that are going to allow us to do things like search for songs on Spotify and then add them to our library. So I'm just going to add those methods in now, fairly straightforward. When it comes to searching for a song, we're likely going to need the artist and the track. So for now, we'll just put those as parameters. And then we're going to want a method to be able to add our song, the song that we found, to our Spotify library. That's likely going to need some sort of song ID, so we'll put that in the parameters there too. Now looking at the Spotify documentation, we know that to issue a request you're going to need an OAuth token. So in the class I'm going to set an instance variable that's going to store the API token. You can call it OAuth token, whatever you want. I'm just calling it API token. And we're going to use that in these methods when it comes to searching for a song and adding a song to Spotify. We're also going to need two other libraries. One is of course the request library. It's the HTTP request library in Python, and the second one is a URL lib library. This is going to contain a helper that's going to allow us to build up a URL, but I'll get onto that later on. So let's start writing the code for searching the song. So to actually do that using the Spotify web API, you need to formulate a get URL string. So I'm going to show it on the screen now very quickly, but essentially it takes two things. The first is the search string, in which case that's just going to be the artist and the track. We're going to put them together as a string, and then hopefully that should be enough to yield a result. And the second thing we're going to need is to specify that we're searching for a track, and so we'll formulate that URL here now. Cool. So now that we've got that, here, now the next step is to actually issue the request. And to do that on the Spotify web API, in that to search for a song, you need to issue a GET request. So the GET request, of course, takes a URL. Of course, I misnamed that. I used query twice, so you probably spotted that. So I'm going to rename that to a URL. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pass in headers. And the headers are quite important here. So the first header that we're going to pass in is the content type, and this is essentially going to tell the Spotify web API that we're expecting a response that's going to contain JSON, and we do that by specifying application/JSON. And the second thing we're going to do, and this is the most important thing, is we're going to pass in the authorization header, because in this header we're going to pass, as you can guess, the API token, the OAuth token. And earlier on in the initialization method of the Spotify client, that's where we stored it in an instance variable, so we're just going to pull that in there now. So now we've issued the request and we've stored in the response variable. This .json is a helper that's going to allow us to get the response as a JSON object to work with. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the list of tracks from the response we got from back from Spotify, and you're going to find that in tracks and items. That's the key. So we're going to store that in results, and what we're going to do is a simple F check here, right? Because if, for example, the track was found, then Spotify is going to give you a list of results. It's going to give you a list of items back. So what we want to do is we want to check, hey, if there are any results, results being 1 or more, then we're going to assume that the first result is the one we wanted, in which case we're going to return the ID of that song. However, if there aren't any results, like Spotify couldn't find a song, we're going to raise an exception, because we want to know if, for example, Spotify couldn't find a track, in which case we can't add it to our Spotify library. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to write the code to add a song to our Spotify liked songs. So once we've searched Spotify to see if the song that we're after exists, and we've got back the song ID, it's now time to use that so that we can actually add it to our liked songs. And the way you do that is quite similar to before in terms of the structure. What we're going to do here is we're going to have a URL. We're going to issue out a request to that URL and pass it the song ID. And then we're going to get back the response to make sure it was okay. Instead of issuing a get request like we did last time, we're going to issue a put request. That's what Spotify want. And put and post tend to be used, the HTTP methods that tend to be used when you add or create things. So the thing we're going to do here is we're going to issue a put request. We're going to pass in some JSON. Quite handy, we've got a parameter to be able to put that in. And in this case, we're going to pass in a key called IDs, and that's going to contain an array of all the different song IDs that we want to add to our like songs. In this case, I'm using the shorthand notation to indicate that I just want to add one song, the one song that we got back. For now, we'll just do one at a time. Maybe we can, in the future, we can update the code to be able to allow us adding multiple songs. Headers are similar to what they were before. Passing the API token, of course, that's important. And then this is a very handy way to be able to check if that request was successful. Response.OK, that's either going to return true or false. Now it's time to put this all together, and we're going to go back to the run.py file. And this is a great thing about doing all the groundwork, because now we can instantiate the YouTube client. So the first item is to get all the lists, all the playlists from our YouTube channel. And so we can instantiate the YouTube client. We pass in the location of the credentials, and then we call the method that we created earlier, which is YouTube client.getPlaylists, and then we store that in the playlist variable. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to prompt the user ask them which playlist has the songs that they want, so that we can then search for them and add them to our Spotify like songs. And the reason why we do this is we want to make it a bit interactive, right? The user might have a bunch of playlists. We don't want to make any assumptions. You want to let them pick which playlist, right? And so to do that, I'm going to do something that's quite handy. I do it quite a lot in Python. And it's to make use of what's known as the enumerate function. And that allows you to iterate through the list. So you iterate through every item in the list, but you also can get access to its position. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to print out every playlist, but we're also going to print it out with its position, so that when we ask the user, hey, which playlist do you want to select? Instead of them having to type out the name of the playlist, they just select the position. And that's going to be a number, which is going to be quite easy for them, right? So just to show you, here's an idea of what that looks like on the screen. So they're going to see a list of playlists, and again, they're just going to type in the number of the one they select. Now we have to make sure that when we're getting the user input, we want to make sure we cast it to an integer, right? Because we're going to use that to index or get the chosen playlist from the list of playlists that we have. So in this case, once we get the selection from the user, we're going to index that in the playlist array. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get all the videos or the music videos in the playlist that the user selected. And so this is going to be quite simple. We're going to make use of the function we created earlier on the YouTube client, which is get videos from playlist. So we're going to type that out. So that's going to be songs. We're going to assume that every video in that playlist is a song. So we're going to store it in songs, and then we're going to type in get videos from playlist, and then we're going to pass in the playlist ID, and that's going to reference the one that the user selected. Once we've done that, then we're just going to print out on the screen how many videos that we found and how many we're actually going to attempt to add to our Spotify library. Now the next thing we want to do, now that we've got back a list of songs, again, if you remember that that method, get videos from playlist, will essentially return back a list of songs, and each song is going to contain an artist and a track. And so what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through the list of songs, and we're going to search for that song on Spotify. We're going to make use of the Spotify client search song method that we created earlier, and we're going to pass in the artist and the track. And one thing I'm going to do when it comes to setting up the Spotify client is we're going to need the OAuth key, right? And the OAuth key is a string that you can get on the Spotify web API dashboard. But what we want to do is we don't want to hard code that in our program. Never hard code API keys in your program. It's not good practice. If someone gets access to the source code, they have access to all your API keys. That's definitely not a good idea. What you want to do is you want to store them in environment variables. So what I'm doing here is I'm importing the library called OS in Python, and I'm calling the os.getEnv method, and I'm typing the name of the environment variable that I want to use, in which case Spotify auth token, and that's where I'm going to store the Spotify auth API key, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So now we can call the method to search for the song. Again, we pass song.artist and song.track. And then, to be honest, we can finish off here because the next bit of code is quite straightforward. We just want to make sure that as long as we got a Spotify song ID back, in other words, as long as Spotify, that request, we found a song, then we want to add that song to our like songs. And again, we call the Spotify client method that we created earlier, which is add song to Spotify, and here we just pass in the Spotify song ID that we got back, and then we do another if check. If we were able to add the song, then we print, hey, we added the song successfully to your liked songs. Now, one thing I almost forgot is Google have a annoying thing where they actually dynamically or lazy load libraries, so I just need to change those imports, so make sure you do that just before you try and run the program. Now, to add an environment variable, you typically use the export function. So right now I'm in my terminal, I type in export, the name of the environment variable, and then I set it equal to the API key. On production servers, there's typically a better process to do this, but this is doing it locally. And again, here you can tell that the auth token is now stored in that environment variable, and it can be used for any program that we now run. So let's run the program. So I'm in my terminal, I'm in the directory of my program, I type Python run. Of course, that's not how you run a Python program. So Python run.py, don't forget the extension like I did, okay? So Python run.py, fantastic. Yes, now we're prompted to visit this URL to get our YouTube data API auth token, authorization code, sorry. So click that. That's going to open up the browser. That's going to make you sign in and select your YouTube channel. So I'm going to do all of that now. Just click and continue. You're going to have to do it a few times. That's what working with Google APIs looks like. And then once you've got the authorization code, you want to copy that and paste that into your terminal. So if you go back to your terminal where it says enter your authorization code, you want to paste that in. And then the program is going to do its magic. It's going to get the list of playlists. It's printed out all the playlists. Fantastic. I'm going to select the first one, which is new music. I'm going to do that by typing 0. And now it's going to do the magic. So now it's going to get all the videos, search for the songs, add them to Spotify. So hopefully soon enough. Perfect. It's attempting to add 5 songs. It found 5 songs. And it added every single one of them to my playlist. So let's check that worked. I'm going to switch over to Spotify. I'm going to look at my liked songs. And yeah, there we go. We can tell those 5 songs were just added a few seconds ago. So fantastic, that worked. Great, so we just automated the entire process of getting all the music videos from our YouTube playlist and then adding them to our Spotify library. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do give this video a like, because as long as I continue to get likes on my videos, I'll continue to make more videos. And do subscribe if you want to see more content from me. Until then, thanks a lot for watching. Have a lovely day, and see you later.